Bingo. Okay. All right. I do have one special request. I'd love to get a screenshot of everyone's faces. So for posterity. So if you do not want to be in the photo, this is your chance. You can turn the camera off, but we'd love to have everyone's faces in here smiling. So I'll give you all a moment and I'll do a little countdown. If you want to do a big smile, a big wave, I'd surely appreciate it. So let's do it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thank you everyone for entertaining me with that. So with it, who is the Humane League, if this is your first time attending one of our events? So the Humane League is a global nonprofit with a mission of ending the abuse of animals raised for food. We're made up of a volunteer network of change makers who do great changes for animals suffering on factory farms. This is through effective grassroots and online actions. And change makers like Tuana, our special guest, make a difference by influencing the policy of the world's biggest companies, demanding legislation, and empowering others to take action and leave animals off their plate. As I alluded to, our most dedicated change makers are called captains, such as Tuana, who I'd love to introduce. She's 20 years old, is the author of 4 children's books, all proceeds being donated to animal charities. She's currently pursuing a degree that she created at the University of Miami called PPE, which stands for Politics, Philosophy, and Economics, while also working as a research assistant for a Harvard law professor. Her position at the University of Miami includes being the chair of academic affairs, student government representative for Faculty Senate, and the senator for the College of Arts and Sciences. After graduation, she wishes to go into law school. She's also got a rich background with international education, having studied in institutions around the world. So some of them include Harvard University, the American University of Paris, Franklin University in Switzerland, Oxford, Cambridge, Bosporus, and Florence University of the Arts. So with her international education, Tuana can speak 4 languages like Turkish, German, English, and French. Besides her academic career, Tuana is also learning to fly helicopters and is pursuing a private license. As an artist, she opened her first art exhibition at the age of 4 at the Gallery Artist in Istanbul, and since then, her artwork has been exhibited in various galleries around the world. This will be important later on. She's not only given academic presentation and speeches on her studies internationally, but also on animal welfare activism, and has received various awards on an international level. Tuana joined the Humane League in August of 2019 as a Florida captain. And as a captain, she's organized various events and activities. However, as an activist, she has done a lot of successful projects outside of the Humane League. Her work on saving sea turtles and banning horse-drawn carriages has drawn attention worldwide. So today, Tuana will give us a presentation about her extensive work on the banning of horse-drawn carriages, and will be sharing a special experience that she was a part of last year. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to Tuana.
Thank you, Ryan. I will quickly share my screen. Okay. All right, and I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to come to my presentation today. There are amazing individuals from all over the world joining the call right now, and from US, Europe, Asia, and even Australia. And I'm honored to be able to share my experience with you all. My presentation is going to be in 2 parts. First, I will talk about my experience working with the mayor of Istanbul to ban the horse-drawn carriages in the Princess Islands. And actually, the mayor of Istanbul himself was going to be on the call with us today. However, unfortunately, something came up, so he won't be with us today. But during the second part of the presentation, I will be sharing certain techniques I used that may be helpful to you for future projects as well. And periodically, as I reference certain articles or videos, Ryan will send them the links from the chat so that you can read about them later if you're interested. Okay. And now before I jump into how I started to work with the mayor of Istanbul, I have to explain my background on the subject of horse-drawn carriages, because I did not just have an epiphany midday about how horse-drawn carriages should be banned. I've actually been working on this issue for 5 years. Therefore, I will quickly talk about how it all started. Okay. Well, first, I fully witnessed the mistreatment of commercial horses when I was studying at the Florence University of the Arts in Italy for 2 months during the summer of 2015. It was excruciatingly hot outside and people were packing into shops to cool down. The horses, on the other hand, were drawing carts full of tourists, and their motivation was being whipped, and the opportunity to rest or even eat and drink depended on the kindness of their owner. And unfortunately, this kindness seemed rare. And when I went home, I immediately researched this topic and discovered that commercial horses often prematurely die due to these conditions. And this experience made me want to spread awareness of this issue, especially as it is often neglected. Their situation made me so upset that I promised myself I would do everything in my power to help them. So my first step in the beginning of my sophomore year in high school was to create a new club called the Horse Liberation Club, which would focus on the issue of commercial horse-drawn carriages. However, creating the club itself was far more difficult than I expected, because at first my high school discouraged me to create this club under the school's name because a lot of the students were equestrians and they were worried that their parents especially would be offended by this club. So I explained the idea of my club to my equestrian friends and I explained it in a personalized way. I asked them how they would feel if their own horses were treated under the same conditions that these horses used for horse-drawn carriages have been subjected to. And after I got the full support from the equestrians, I created the club, and it was a big success at my school. I even created a website, and I have a little screenshot there for this club to show the progress that we made the years following its creation. And as one of our activities, we joined some of the signature campaigns initiated by NY Class, which is a wonderful nonprofit organization that works to ban the horse-drawn carriages in New York City. I also decided to do some historical research to explain how and why these horse-drawn carriages came into being in the first place. And when I analyzed their historical background, I came to notice how commercial horses were originally a crucial part of people's daily lives. But now the technology and organization of society has changed so much that today such a condition for horses is anachronistic and completely unnecessary. And to show this gradual change over the course of thousands of years, dating back actually to the time of the Celtics, I decided to create a photograph gallery, including a timeline of historical context. And I have some examples here. And what I wanted to accomplish by creating this exhibition is for people to simply ask themselves whether we really live in the same conditions that require horse-drawn carriages today, and really need to inhumanely treat horses to simply satisfy our historical nostalgia. And I've arranged this photograph exhibition at school and in public areas, as you can see here. And along with these exhibitions, I gave presentations on an international level, and Ryan will send you the link to some of my presentations on YouTube, and I have little screenshots of them here. So after doing the research and all these presentations, I decided to reach a wider audience. And therefore, I wrote and illustrated this book, and I have one right here, which got published in both Turkish and English. And I donated 100 copies to NY Class, the organization I previously talked about, and they said that they would use my books for their outreach efforts. And I also donated 100 copies to the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality so that the municipality can hand them out during the meetings for the change in the transportation system of the islands. Now on to my experience with the Princess Islands. I wanted to first give you a visual of what they look like. And the Princess Islands are made up of 9 archipelago off the coast of Istanbul, but only 5 of them have regular settlements. And these 5 islands are Kınalıada, Burgazada, Heybeliada, Büyükada, and Sedef Adası. And I will be testing you on these names at the end. So there were 1,500 horses used for horse-drawn carriages on these islands that you see right here. And it feels pretty great to be able to say were instead of are now that the entire transportation system is changed. Now, before I went to Paris last summer to study at the American University of Paris for about 2 months, I had a meeting with the deputy mayor of the Princess Islands, and I have a picture of me and him at the meeting right there, about the banning of horse-drawn carriages there. However, because the Princess Islands are connected to Istanbul, he told me that his hands were completely tied until they saw who won the local elections in Istanbul. Now it gets a little bit complicated here because during that time, we were waiting for the second local elections to take place because the first municipal elections on March 31st were kind of just disregarded by the president because he wanted someone from his own party to win the elections. And Ekrem İmamoğlu, who is the current mayor, had won instead. So the president arranged for re-elections to take place on June 23rd of that summer, hoping that his guy will win. So as you can tell, the politics doesn't run quite like the US or Europe in Turkey. Now, let me quickly, and I have to show these pictures because this is the reality in the islands, or the reality. So let me quickly give you some statistics about what used to happen to the horses there. Around 700 to 800 horses died per year on the islands due to accidents or maltreatment. And the government officially buried around 400 horses per year. However, bodies of horses were also found at the bottom of the Sea of Marmara or in the forests. Therefore, many reports predict that the death of the horses per year were around 700 to 800 instead. And while a normal horse is supposed to live around 20 to 25 years, the horses on the islands lived up to only 2 years. There also weren't any treatment centers on the islands to take care of the horses in case of an injury, which happened quite often because these horses had to run up and down steep hills on asphalt roads, which is a surface very much against the nature of these horses. And to make things even worse, if that's even possible, they also made pregnant horses or horses that recently gave birth work just as hard as any other horse. And they also had these horses work daily on an empty stomach and without providing enough water because normally you're supposed to wait around 3 hours after feeding a horse if you're going to exercise them intensely. And the owners did not have time to waste because time was money for them. Actually, there were only a few people who owned all these horses on the islands, and they rented these horses to buyers for about 6 months at a time, just like a taxi plate. And the buyers worked these horses like actual slaves so that they can compensate for the money they paid and finally start to make profit off of them. So the buyers didn't see the horses as living creatures, only as money makers. So they didn't spend any of the money that they earned on the proper treatment of these horses. So I want to just explain how the conditions of these horses before any sort of change that we made. This picture now shows how these horses were transported to the islands. They were imported either legally or illegally from different countries to Istanbul. And from Istanbul, they were put out on these boats to be sent to the islands. Wounded horses were at times thrown into the Sea of Marmara from the boat because they couldn't use them in the islands. And some horses that panicked on the boat also sometimes just jumped off to their death. And I want to share a horrific incident that happened in the summer of 2018. The authorities had slaughtered 81 horses on the islands due to an outbreak of a fatal equine disease. And the horses were slaughtered after being diagnosed with Glander's disease, which also affects donkeys and mules. And a quarantine was put into place, barring the entry and exit of animals on the islands to prevent the disease from spreading. However, around 220 horses were brought to Turkey to be used as carriage horses in the islands. And because they were barred entry to the islands due to the quarantine, they suffered under the scorching heat on the boat that I have the picture of on the screen for around 2 weeks. And then from the boat, they were sent to an empty piece of land around the size of this exact boat here in Istanbul's Beykoz district for more than 2 months, that amount of space. They grew weak due to spending all day under the scorching sun and due to lack of food. And the owners resort to injecting them with vitamins to ensure survival instead of properly taking care of them. And Ryan, I believe, just sent 2 articles related to this incident from the chat. And I just want you all to see how these horses were treated even before they were treated like slaves on the islands and worked to their death. Now a little bit of more happy news. Because of the conditions of these horses, and because none of the protests on the Princess Islands were making a difference, I knew I couldn't give up on this. And when I was studying in Paris, the re-elections took place again, and Ekrem İmamoğlu won again with even a bigger majority vote. And because he won, I was even more hopeful because he was also an animal lover. And during his campaigns, he also mentioned multiple times that he would work on projects for the street dogs and cats in Turkey, which is also another huge problem. And the second he won the elections, I researched some people I could have meetings with at the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, reached out to them and started to arrange meetings weeks ahead. And the minute I returned to Istanbul from Paris, I went to my first meeting with the General Secretary of the Mayor, who is another fellow animal lover and a very successful woman in Istanbul. I had come into this meeting fully prepared with even a feasibility plan ready to go, taking into account the GDP of Istanbul and how much money would have to be spent on buying all these horses, replacing them with electric cars, and finally letting the horses live the remaining time they had left in peace on government lands in Istanbul. So after our meeting, she was very interested in my project idea, and because I had everything planned out already, she arranged for me to have a meeting with the newly elected mayor. So I finally had a meeting with Ekrem İmamoğlu. And at the meeting, I saw just how down-to-earth, giving, strategic, and just how much he cared for the ideas of the next generation. And actually, during our meeting, one specific thing he said really stuck with me. He said, we have to ask the next generation about what they want in their future environment to look like. So he's very, very educated, you have to be very extremely patient to be to hold this job, and very determined to follow through with the ideas he had planned for his time as mayor. And also, let me just quickly be clear, if someone like Ekrem İmamoğlu wasn't the mayor, the project probably could not have been possible, and the horses could have been in worse conditions if that's, even possible. So I'm very thankful that, he was the mayor, and very honored to know a great soul like him. Now back to the meeting. During the meeting, he explained to me that they were sensitive about this issue in the islands, but that this would most definitely not be an easy process and that it would take a very long time. But he told me not to get discouraged by this because I wanted the whole transportation system to change in a day or two so the horses would immediately be freed. So then he put me in contact with his transportation team. And after I had the meeting with his transportation team, they decided to create a workshop dedicated just for finding a solution to the horse-drawn carriages in the Princess Islands. And they actually offered me the job of being the official advisor to the workshop. And let me just quickly emphasize the fact that at this time, Ekrem İmamoğlu had only been the mayor for 37 days, and my project was his first workshop. So after I accepted the job, I asked for them to not pay me because I was truly doing this volunteering for the 1,500 horses there. And after about 20 days with the workshop meetings in Istanbul, I had to return to Florida because my university was about to start. But because I couldn't physically be at the meetings anymore, I knew that I had to be extra attentive and work extra hard to ensure that the workshop was a success. So the most challenging part of my work was the time difference. And at this point, because the CHP, which is the mayor's party, wanted to follow a democratic approach to making changes, they wanted to have a conference at the Princess Islands and invite over 200 organizations. And listen to this. This part really got to me, including organizations that want horse-drawn carriages on the islands and the owners of these carriage horses with their own supporters. So they were all there in one room together. And I'm sure you can figure out how that went down. The Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality wanted to listen to the solutions the organizations came up with and include them in the decision-making process. And because I couldn't be there, they asked me to make a video talking about the project so that they could show it to everyone during the meeting. And I actually honestly thought that because they were being so transparent with the decision-making process, that everyone would be civil at the meeting and listen to both points of view. And boy, was I wrong. Couldn't be more off key on that. This was definitely a huge learning experience for me, because I was thinking that once this project was presented, clearly explaining how the owners would not lose their business, rather the municipality would pay for all the horses, pay for licensed horse-drawn carriages, and that they would just transfer their business over to electric cars and make the same money, and explain how this would not be an inconvenience to anyone. You would think that they would be okay with this, but no. The owners of the horse-drawn carriages and their supporters, and some from the media, caused absolute mayhem in the middle of the meeting, yelling things like, "The history of the islands will be lost," which, as a side note, couldn't be further from the truth, because they literally cannot point to a single historic building that hasn't been torn down in the islands. So I even got in contact with some journalists like Yılmaz Özdil, who supported the CHP, again, that's the mayor's party, but wrote all over the news that the electric cars wouldn't satisfy their historical nostalgia. And the craziest part was that especially this one journalist, Bekir Coşkun, who loved animals and always wrote about their mistreatment, and he even complained in his articles about losing the nostalgia. And as you can imagine, I immediately contacted them and had very, very long conversations about this, and finally asked them if the only way to keep this nostalgia was to see and treat these poor living creatures as industrial slaves. I once again saw that even very educated people who give back to the community in certain aspects can still lack the compassion in other issues. Now, because of the outbursts that happened one after another after this meeting, the officials working in the workshop tried to take a step back because they were just disturbed by the outrage. And before the workshop's final report, which would be sent to the mayor for final approval, the officials started to doubt if banning all the horse-drawn carriages was the right move, and contemplated if we should leave a certain amount, maybe like 10 of these horse-drawn carriages, so that people could still satisfy their historical nostalgia. And of course, I caused actual mayhem when I heard this and said that a promise was made and that we would stick by our promise. So at last, our final report was sent to the mayor for approval. And starting October 1st, initially, the horse-drawn carriages were banned for 3 months. The mayor announced that little by little, the horse-drawn carriages would be removed from the islands, because of course you can't just change an entire transportation system overnight, even though that's exactly what I wanted. The electric cars had to be made and tested on the islands first to make sure that they work properly with all the steep terrain. And these pictures show the different kinds of electric vehicles on the islands. And there were even electric carriages constructed that functioned without the need of a horse, so that people still experience the feeling of being in a carriage. And listen to this, people complained about the color of certain vehicles and said that they weren't aesthetically pleasing. So there you go with that. And here I've shown a before and after of how the horse-drawn carriages were lined up to service everyone versus how the electric cars are lined up now. So overall, the municipality paid approximately 90 million liras, which is about $15.3 million, for 277 registered carriage plates and horses. So that is about $51,000 per registered carriage plate, and around $680 for each horse. And the 1,500 horses were taken to rehabilitation centers and finally taken care of. And nowadays, most of them were able to regain their health, thankfully, and are now going to be adopted. However, even though they're going to be adopted, they're going to be checked up on by the municipality's veterinary services. And here are pictures of Ekrem Imamoglu himself visiting the horses that he shared on his Instagram account. And Ryan will send you a link from the chat to an English article that explains how the horses were purchased and are now free. And I have screenshots from a video, which is unfortunately just in Turkish, but it explains how well these horses are being taken care of. And Ryan will send the link to you if you would like to see for yourself how well they're being, currently being taken care of right now. And I've also provided another video of these horses running freely in this rehabilitation center. And I have to say, I honestly cried multiple times from happiness when I watched this video. If you watch it, you won't be able to stop watching it. This success was years and years and years overdue. And thousands of horses have suffered their entire lives and died as slaves just for a few minutes of enjoyment for each person. And I want to finish part one of this presentation with words from my own book. And the quote goes, "The tyranny of humans over animals has been a cause of great sorrow up to the present. The struggle against this tyranny is as important as any moral and social struggle. If we end the brutal exploitation of this species, which is at the mercy of our power, we will become not just more humane, but more human." And now on to part two, which is a summary of techniques I used during this process. So for big projects that require a change in law, working with politicians instead of working against them might be the better approach. Protests can spread awareness and bring the idea of change to the eyes of the politicians. However, for certain things, protests can only get us so far. Therefore, getting in contact with and working with government officials is best when working out a way to change the law. And if you do decide to follow with your project, do your research. Know and understand the politics of the area you're going to work in. Understand political agendas, because it is key to understand where the officials stand on the issues you want to make a change in. Further, understand what is going on in the world. Take a step back and look at where the other countries stand on this issue and how they have handled it in their own countries. And you have to work your way up. You can't just simply waltz into the government official's office and demand change. And in order to impress the initial people you get in contact with, you need to be overly prepared, which brings me to my next point. Be more than prepared when you first present your project. I cannot stress this enough. Examine why this project is needed, what possible solutions there are, and how the solutions could be followed through, because no one is going to think or do your work for you. Therefore, taking matters into your own hands, playing the devil's advocate with your own plan, make sure you have an answer to every single question they might throw at you. And if it applies, make a budget plan. Look at the city's budgets, the country's GDP, how the money is allocated, and how much is put aside for the area your project affects. Of course, all this information might not be available, but just do your best with what you can find. And create a feasible plan that the politicians cannot say no to. For example, you can even make your argument through the idea of transparency and back your argument up with how it aligns with their own political stance. And remember, public image is key for politicians. There are millions of points of views and ways in which you can shape your argument. Make sure you also include how this will be beneficial not only to animals, but to them. People can be very selfish in nature, unfortunately, and politicians very much care for their public image. So make sure you explain very well how this will be beneficial to how they are presented. And understand that this is politics. People have their own agenda and can turn their back on you and back away from the project at any minute. Don't let it happen. Be persistent. Do not get discouraged if they try to back away from your idea. Be confident in your knowledge and your project, And do not simply accept the fact that they're going to second guess your project. And do not ever be discouraged, because these big changes take a long time. And that is something I had trouble with, because I want the horses to be free that very second. And always keep in mind, we are the voice of animals. We're not doing this for our own benefit. And these are some of the lessons I've learned through my experience. And I hope to build on these lessons with every change I hope to make. And my experience with the Princess Islands has given me hope that big changes like these are possible. And I always hold the words, do the most good you can do, close to my heart, and follow the advice for the rest of my life. And as some of you might know, the words, do the most good you can do, belong to Professor Peter Singer, who I proudly say is my mentor. And I'm beyond honored to say that he has joined us today all the way from Australia. Thank you so much for joining me today and for your continuous support. And I just would like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to attend my presentation. And I would also like to give a huge thank you to the Humane League for giving me the opportunity to share my experience with you. And I hope that this can inspire you to make or continue to make big changes for animal rights. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, so I would like to open up the floor to any questions or comments.
Well, I say on behalf of everyone, before we get into Q&A, would everyone mind unmuting and doing a big round of applause for Tuana? Great. So Q&A can be done in a bunch of different ways. I figure we can just do simply if you raise your hand physically. Tuana will monitor it and just call on someone. You can ask whatever you'd like. So would anyone like to be first?
I'm trying to look through. No questions so far?
Nobody else wants to go first. I just want to say
Oh.
thanks for the presentation, Tuana. And you certainly made whatever little mentoring I was able to do for you really worthwhile, because you've shown that you're a very hard worker and very dedicated person. You're very thoughtful. You plan very well, as you showed in your presentation. And if you do that, you can get results. You've got terrific results for animals already. And I'm sure you're learning all the time. As you said, that meeting was a learning experience for you. I wasn't that surprised, actually, that there was some opposition from the owners. People tend to be very conservative about changing what they're doing. Yeah, I look forward to all of the other things that you're going to be doing in the coming years. And I hope some of the other people in this call will also be thinking about what they can do in the same way.
Thank you so much, Professor Singer, for everything, really. And you've inspired all of us in this call. And I mean, I look forward to working with you too. And thank you so much again. And do we have any other questions? I feel like I saw a hand before. Okay. Okambe.
Hello, first of all, congratulations and thank you for someone who has been on those islands, who have seen the horses and followed the process, followed the political process. I have one question, one comment. My first question is whether is there any plan to extend it to US? I mean, I can think of New York City, Charleston area with a lot of horse carriages. And the second is, maybe I missed in your presentation, there's a big, second is more comment than question. There's a big, a lot of economics behind it too. And I think one of the critical things to mention to the audience is most of the drivers of those horse carriages are being employed now by the municipality, and they are driving the electrical vehicles. Mm-hmm. So those families, some people who really, not the owners of the horses, but the families who rely on the income they get from it. Now they have a more stable, more secure income.
Yes, and I've
Thanks again.
thank you. And I've actually mentioned this during the presentation when I was, very confused about during the meeting that took place on the islands, because it was clearly explained that they wouldn't be losing their job. Instead, they would be paid for all the carriage plates and the horses it's themselves, and that they would just continue their business with electric cars. And that's why I was so shocked that it wasn't a civil conversation there, because I feel like it wouldn't probably been fair if they just all lost their jobs, but that wasn't even the case. So that's when I was very wrong with how I was thinking the meeting was going to go, and that was definitely a learning experience. And yeah, and the first question, I believe, was what was the first question again?
Whether there is any extension to the project to
Right.
extend it to US, maybe Charleston or New York City.
That's a very good
Those
question.
are the two ones that comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm. That's a very, very good question. And I've been trying to, bring this to the US as well. And, working with NY class, one of the big problems is in New York as well. And I really, really hope that what we've accomplished in Turkey will inspire this to happen in US as well, because the whole transportation system was changed in the islands in a matter of months. And if that's possible in Turkey, it's definitely possible here. So we hope to continue that. And I hope that this story inspires it to us to do the same in the States. Are there any more questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So I just want to say I appreciate all the work that you did. I think this was a very informative presentation. And I guess my question is sort of similar to the one Okan asked, but the question is like, if you are now like already starting, I guess if we can get like a sneak peek of another project maybe you're working on or starting like soon or right now.
Okay, well, like a sneak peek. I've been working on this for about 5 years, and like I explained, I've been working with NY class as well, and also St. Augustine as well. And in the States, it takes a long time for this to pass, and I've also been in contact with people who advocate the animal rights in the mayor's office in New York City as well. And unfortunately, the mayor didn't keep his promise. And that was one of the promises that he made, that he was going to ban the horse-drawn carriages. So, that's on him. And so we continue to fight, and I will for sure let you know. And I hope this reassures you, I will not ever give up on this. And I hope none of you will either. And I hope to and I really hope the same thing happens in the States. And I will be working with NY class as well for the future. And especially right now, because of COVID, the horses are actually not being used. And this is a great time to really push this issue in the States, so that the horses don't have to come back and work after COVID. So this is actually a great time to work on it. So that's that.
Right.
Are there any more?
Thank you.
Of course. I'm trying to see if there are any more questions. If you don't want to turn your camera on, you can always raise your hand through the little emoji thing. Oh, yes, Gilbert.
I also wanted to say I do appreciate all the work that you've done. I personally love horses. My dad has a couple of horses back at home in California, and so seeing the happy ending was really rewarding. And it was also really tough seeing the horses like that. I think my question is in regards to like more like pack animals, because one of my experiences is I went to an Indian resort in Arizona called Havasupai, where it's an Indian reservation, and you have to hike like 10 miles in to get to the campground. And the Indian reservation, the tribe there, they have pack animals so you can put your 50-pound backpack up on the pack mules, and then they'll pack them in for you. And so I've been there several times, and the first time that I went there, the pack animals were really beat. Some of them, you know, had like really severe abrasions on their skin and stuff like that. And they obviously were malnourished, and they were just in really awful condition. And so after I think a couple of times that I went, I noticed that they were no longer there, and PETA got kind of like brought attention to it. And I was just wondering if you've ever worked with pack animals at all. I think you mentioned mules and other animals, or if they were used as horse-drawn, I guess, carriages as well.
Oh, the horses there were also used as horse-drawn carriages?
No, I was just wondering if like you've ever seen like pack animals being abused, or
Well, I wouldn't say that like pack animals, like I haven't really worked with that, because I try to work with very specific like issues, and the ones I've worked so far, for example, are you know, horse-drawn carriages specifically, for example, sea turtles, and even street dogs in Turkey. And I mentioned that was like a really big issue in Turkey, because there's street dogs, I mean, in packs, and cats, and their conditions are absolutely terrible. And Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul, said that, I mean, he has all these projects to help that cause in Turkey, because it's very specific to Europe. So, you know, I hope to be able to help with that as well. But to answer your question, I have worked with very specific topics as of now, and I work with the Humane League as well now. And, you know, if you have any more ideas, feel free to reach out to me. And I believe Ryan sent out my information from the chat, and I would love to work with you guys as well. So please don't be afraid to reach out to me, and I will be able to work with you as well on your ideas. Are there any more questions? Yes, Timothy.
Yeah, I wanted to congratulate you, Tuana, on your hard work. I think I heard you say something in the effect that when you went there, or when you started the ball rolling on this, you sort of wanted it now. And I remember when I formed, I was co-founder of Chain Free Austin, that successfully passed a dog chaining ordinance for the city of Austin, Texas. And I know that when I started it, I really expected it to be an easy sell. I expected to walk in there with the Animal Advisory Commission and have them say, you know, yes, we see that chaining dogs is inhumane, but they did not see that. And we had to jump through a lot of different hoops and a lot of different things that I didn't expect. So I think I wanted to comment on that sometimes when we have when we have something that we're working on and we want to present it to the appropriate people, we need to expect that it's not going to be an easy sale, and we might have to bring in variables that we didn't expect. And because it was a long, much like yours, it was a long journey, but it ended up successfully like yours. But sometimes you see things that come out of left field that you did not expect, and you somehow have to readjust and go down a different path than when you started. So I just wanted to comment on that for any of the other people on here that are you know, wanting to change things, that sometimes it's not as easy as you want it to be, and it's also not as quick as you want it to be. So it's really about persistence, and like you said, it's about remembering that, you know, this is about the animals and not about us. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. That's one of the key things that, you know, from the presentation. I mean, it definitely takes time, and that was the hardest thing for me, because, you know, true animals lovers like yourselves, I mean, I'm sure if you saw the conditions of these horses, you would want to jump in immediately and, you know, just grab the horses and try to set them free yourselves. But of course, you won't be able to do that. And when your hands are tied that way, it really hurts your soul. And it really took a lot out of me to fully understand the fact that this wasn't going to change overnight. And, you know, with every little thing that was a setback for me, you know, a little part of me, you know, died a little bit. I was like, oh no, this is, you know, not going to go as we planned, as it was promised. And that's why, I mean, and these things happened a lot through my experience. And unfortunately, nothing just goes as smoothly as you planned them or as you wanted it to. So this was definitely a huge learning experience for me as well. And I really learned to be patient with these big changes. So are there any more questions or comments? I'm trying to look at all pages.
I found it really interesting how when you first tried to start the club at the school, they initially said, you know, the equestrian people won't like it, you know, and then your move was to go to the equestrian people and really talk to them like on a really personal level, you know, and I like that because that seemed like a similar approach to what you took with the mayor, right? Like once you sat down with them and you know, you got to know him, you got to know him on a personal level, and he seemed like, you know, he was also an animal lover and all this other stuff, and so I really like that approach, that, you know, you can approach people on a really personal level, and then usually when that happens is when you can get them on your side. But yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of comment on that. Very impressive.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that up, because again, that's key, because you can shape an argument in a million different ways, you know, and you really need to know your audience when you're approaching them, and that's another thing when working, you know, with politicians. You really need to know your audience, which is why I said do your research, because for them to want to help you, you need to explain how this is also going to help them. And you know, even though you might, you know, do this because you're selfless and you truly want to do it for animals, other people may not be like that. So that's not maybe how you approach this. And again, you know, just really know how to shape your argument. And I think that was one of the key things that I got from this as well. So thank you for bringing that up. And are there any more questions or comments? Yes, no? Ryan, do you see anyone?
So far, no one's got the raised hand feature. And just doing a quick time check, we're at 7:51 Eastern. So yeah, we can take a couple more questions if anyone has anything they'd love to ask.
Yes, any last questions? Any last questions or comments?
Yeah, don't be shy. And if you don't want to like raise your hand and speak, you can also type your question in the chat and then I'll read it to her.
I guess like one question I wanted to ask was, you know, when they had this workshop and, you know, a lot of people came in opposition, like how did you kind of deal with that? Like, did you try to like actually like rebuttal their points, or did they even have any points that you felt like were worthy of like kind of like addressing, or like I don't know, because here, like especially with like this chicken initiative, like, you know, it seems like people are very conservative and, you know, reluctant to change, and so I was just wondering like maybe if you could comment on how you overcame that.
Very good questions for me today. Okay, so that was actually a big thing, because I was just, you know, so shocked that everyone was just not comprehending what was happening to these animals, and it was happening right in front of their eyes. And all that they cared about was that 1 second of enjoyment that they were going to get from, you know, riding on the carriage horses. And they were just so narrow-minded about the issue. They just cared about their own enjoyment. And that was so hard for me to understand, because, you know, I was just, you know, shocked at how they couldn't see what they were doing to these animals. I mean, this was on the news almost every single day, that like a horse, you know, passed out in the middle of the road, and this was always all over the news. So, and when this was, you know, explained during the meeting, and they clearly explained how this wouldn't be an inconvenience to everyone, people just complained about their historical nostalgia being gone. So, I mean, I was just beyond, I couldn't even understand how they were thinking about that. But of course, I reached out to the journalists, like I explained, and because, you know, they should be reasonable people, you know, they're journalists, and they claim to be animal lovers, but yet they were writing against.
A long conversation.
Yeah, I had long conversations back and forth. I was trying to understand where they were coming from, and they were not changing their mind. So that's why I, you know, had to just understand the fact, and just, you know, be okay with the fact that even very educated individuals who, you know, have done a lot of things for, you know, selfless acts, doesn't mean that they are going to be selfless about, other issues. So I really had to, it took me a minute to fully understand that and comprehend how such educated people couldn't even see it from the horse's point of view.
They just wanted the nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really sad to witness so many people saying that. Oh, yes, Professor Singh.
So, I just have, I mean, as I said, I'm not so surprised by the conservatism and the fact that people don't want to change. That seems to happen. But I think the really interesting thing is that the mayor of Istanbul was prepared to pay, I think you said it was equivalent to $15 million US, was that right?
$15.3 million, yes.
To buy out the horses and provide the electric cars. And that was simply sort of, expenditure. There was no financial recouping of that in any way, right? So that's a pretty big deal, I think, that that the mayor of a city would be prepared to do that, as basically for animals, really. And I think, perhaps you were as you said in your talk, really fortunate to have a mayor elected who was prepared to do that, because I can imagine a lot of other city government officials or saying, no, yes, we're for animal welfare, but we need to control the budget. We can't spend more money. We don't want to raise taxes, all of that sort of stuff.
Exactly. And, during actually our first meeting, I specifically said, I was like, as the CHP, which is the mayor's party, I was like, you guys are promoting transparency. And because the previous mayor wasn't so transparent with how the money was allocated in Istanbul, a lot of what money was kind of just like disappeared. So because now he was the mayor and he advocated transparency, again, doing the research on the politics, and I specifically said, I'm like, since you are going to be transparent with this money, this is the GDP of Istanbul. So this is, a huge sum of money, and $15 million is nothing compared to how much Istanbul is earning. And if we're going to be honest with how the money is going to be allocated, then there's plenty of money to donate to these for the sake of these animals. I mean, look what's happening to each and every one of these horses. So thankfully he was such an animal lover, and he was like, that's exactly right. And he was just so ready. I mean, I have to say, opposition was, absolutely insane. I mean, they were coming at him full force, and he stuck by his promise as well. So I really, congratulate the mayor on sticking up on this issue, really, because he was dealing with a lot of opposition as well.
So what colors were mostly genuinely accepted by everyone for the electric vehicles?
I still cannot believe that wasn't the issue, that people, like, they were just trying to find something wrong with the electric cars, and they just, complain about the color, if that's even possible. I mean, there aren't horses dying anymore. That should be enough, right? But that's obviously not enough for them. And because they said it was too colorful, that was the argument. It's too colorful. So they, but there were like multiple different types of vehicles. Like in the slide, they were like yellow or like actual carriages. But the ones that were very colorful were the real issue. They were like, oh, this is too rainbowy. This is too happy for the Princess Island. So they made a big deal of the colors. But I mean, it's how it is. So now they've accepted that fact, because the mayor is like, this is what it is. This is what we're dealing with. And these will be on the islands. So, yeah.
Tuana, we've got a couple questions in the chat. I think we've got time just for one more, if that's cool with you. So it's from Mitch. He says, Tuana, thank you for sharing this presentation with us today. It's somewhat vague, but if you can, how do you like to organize your thoughts when preparing to speak with decision makers? So he asks if you can be as specific as you can. So like, do you use Google Docs, or do you use Word to flush out your thoughts? Do you use Whiteboard? In other words, what are your tools that you use when you plan your approach?
That's also a great question. So basically I go a little bit above and beyond when I have to be prepared for these types of conversations, because I know that I have one shot when I first meet them, because you're not going to have 20 chances to wow the decision makers. And, the first impression is key. So the first time you meet them, you need to be, and I've, expressed this, I cannot express this enough, the answer to any sort of question they might throw your way. So after I, laid out my thoughts in, you can use Google, Word, whatever you'd like, but just have your thoughts organized. You need to look at what you wrote and what you want to discuss from the point of view of somebody who's completely against you. And you need to look at your thoughts and be like, what possible argument can I make against what I've written here? And really play the devil's advocate with what you've written. Like, think of the most evil person you can imagine that's like pinpointing everything that's wrong with your thoughts, and write those down and have an argument against it, because that's the only way you're going to have an answer to all of your all the questions they might throw at you. And that is very, very important, especially for first impression. So I hope that answers your question.
Cool.
And
Well,
actually, Professor Singer rose his hand, so I quickly want to give him the.
go right ahead.
No, I've already done that. I think. I'm sorry, I forgot to lower it. Is the problem?
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't want to leave you hanging with a
That
question
was
there.
the previous question, and I didn't lower my hand.
All right.
Well,
Good.
yeah.
Thanks very much. Anyway, terrific, good presentation and great discussion.
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Singer. Thank you, Tuana, too, as well, for being guest speaker on tonight's call. So, yeah, we're a minute over time, so I really appreciate everyone stuck around an extra minute. So, again, thank you all for coming. Let's give a round of applause for Tuana answering everyone's questions, talking about her experience in influencing decision makers, which is very relevant to what we do at the Humane League with broiler chickens. So yeah, if you want to get involved, go to thehumaneleague.org/takeaction. And then in the chat, we've got Tuana's contact info if you want to get in touch with her. With that, bid everyone adieu. So hope everyone has a great evening, great morning, wherever you're calling from. And thanks again. So
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming again. Bye.
Bye, Joanne.
Bye.